With only 3 weeks left of the regular season, the action is heating up on the Road of Champions. Welcome to the Road to Champions. I'm your host, Brian Sweeney, the voice of the Women's Football Alliance Pro Division National Championship game. Last weekend, we saw some great action across the country. Here are the top 3 plays of the week. Alex, we are seeing some great action week in and week out. What are your thoughts on the biggest plays so far this season?
Well, I think the best part about this, Brian, is again, we're seeing players that we expect to be in these kind of spots, making these big highlight reel plays. It's not just that these are significant moments in the games themselves and towards the wins and losses that affect an outcome of a game one way or another, but instead what this does is it shows that social media reach, the ability to spread the league around the United States and internationally as well. These are some really good plays, and I can't wait to see what we have again next week.
When we come back, we'll check out the scores and highlights from Week 5. Let's look at the scores and highlights from Week 5. The Tampa Bay Inferno welcomed the Palm Beach Coyotes. After a hard-fought battle in D.C. earlier this month and a week off to recover, the Inferno were ready to play with fire. Palm Beach was not going to go down easy, and were looking to stay over 500. At the end of a tough battle, it was Tampa Bay on top, 14-8. The St. Louis Slam finished their home schedule, welcoming the Derby City Dynamite. This was a big test for the Dynamite, as this was their only game this season against a pro-level team. St. Louis was ready and kept their win streak alive by blanking Derby City 46-0 and increasing their unbeaten streak to 14. In a game that had the 2022 D2 champions playing the 2024 D2 champions, the Nebraska Pride faced off against the Mile High Blaze for the second time this season, this time in the Cornhusker State. Earlier this season, the Pride kept the Blaze off the board. This time, Mile High scored 16, but it wasn't enough as the Pride took the season sweep, this time by a score of 19-16. Alex, these games between the Blaze and the Pride look to be fairly even both times they've met this season, and St. Louis continues to be strong. Your thoughts on these games?
Well, let's start with St. Louis. Again, it's a team that continues to excel in their home city. They have a big matchup this week coming up against Minnesota, but this is a team that once again figures to be that front runner in the American Conference. You like what they see out of the quarterback position. They have a great defense as well, and another shutout against Derby City is a really good mark for St. Louis this season. Meanwhile, Nebraska continues to impress. They continue to be a team that coming into the season, we didn't know what to expect out of them. We didn't know what their ceiling was and really what their basement was based on the schedule that they had. But you see the results that they have. They continue to get good wins against some really good competition. Yes, Mile High is down. Yes, they have to take on Minnesota again. Yes, it'll be in Omaha, but still, that's a matchup on their schedule that's worth watching. But the big picture for the Nebraska Pride, Brian, is that now they're in a spot where they have the catbird seat to make that postseason berth, but also not just to make that postseason berth, but avoid facing off against one of the top seeds in the WFA. If you can avoid that St. Louis in that opening round, that's a big spot for you. And right now, with the Massey ratings where they are, Nebraska has had a very good season, and they deserve to be higher up. Well done by the team out in Omaha.
And in the Week 5 Game of the Week, the Pittsburgh Passion finished out the road portion of their season, this time when they traveled to play the DC Divas. In a matchup of the two strongest teams in the National Conference, Pittsburgh again played a strong, smart game and came out on top and remained one of the two undefeated teams at the pro level, final score 56-27. Alex, these two teams have met 5 times now since Pittsburgh rejoined the league in 2022, with the Passion winning all but one of those games. They will meet again in Week 7 and most likely in the postseason. What can the Divas do to come out the victor in these remaining matchups?
Well, I think that if you look at these two last games that the DC Divas played in a vacuum, you look at the 50 points that they gave up here to Pittsburgh, you look at the 40 points that they gave up to Minnesota the week before. The common denominator, again, is that these are both teams that they're playing that are expected to have those high offenses and those high scorings. But for the DC Divas, as long as we've seen DC as they've been in the league here, the big takeaway is they have to be able to stop high-quality offenses. Right now, they just haven't been able to do that. And maybe that's not necessarily something that's a fault of the defense that they have. Maybe just the talent that they have to play against. DC plays a tough schedule. We know this. We know that despite the wins and losses, you take them in either side of the bracket, either in the National or in the American, and this is a team that's going to make some noise in the postseason because just because they lose a lot doesn't necessarily indicate how good of a team this is. You play Pittsburgh again, but most likely than not, you're going to have to go through Pittsburgh to get to Canton, Ohio. And no, those two cities are not far apart, but odds are you're going to have to go to Pittsburgh and win a game in early July to get to Canton, Ohio. For Pittsburgh again, I mean, let's talk about what we see, right? There's a lot of good things, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Marcelina Chavez, looking at how she played this past Saturday, it looks like she's taken that next step into being that next great quarterback that this league is looking to see. Are there a couple of little nitpicky things to look at for Marcelina and think about how can she improve? Yeah, one that comes to mind, there was a fourth quarter play where she had the ball going out to the left side. There was the option available to go for the pitch to pick up some extra yards, but instead she tucked it and ran right into 3 DC defenders. Those are really small things. She's still doing a great job and continues to fill that gap left by Alyssa George in the quarterback spot. And I really like what I'm seeing out of Pittsburgh again this year. This is a team that, again, unless something bad happens, as it did a year ago, this is a team that figures to be headed to Canton, Ohio.
When we return, we will look at the Week 6 matchups. With only 3 weeks left in the regular season, each victory will help a team make that all-important playoff push. Let's look now at the Week 6 matchups. The 0-3 Philly Phantoms look to get their first win of the season and at home when they welcome the 3-0 Baltimore Nighthawks of Division II. The 1-2 Dallas Elite Mustangs are on the road to face the 0-3 Austin Outlaws of Division II. These teams met earlier this season with the Mustangs coming out on top. And in pro versus pro games, the 2-1 Houston Energy hosts the 3-1 Cali War. In the highly competitive American Conference, a loss for either team could prevent them from making the playoffs. Last season, when these teams met, the War came out on top by 10. DC, Nevada, Mile High, and Nebraska are on byes. Alex, Philly and Dallas are just looking to get in the win column. Whereas for Cali and Houston, a win or a loss could be the difference between making or not making the playoffs. Your thoughts on these games?
Well, I mean, let's start with the you don't want to say non-competitive, but let's start with those games, right? Philly is looking for a win against Baltimore, not just to say that we beat Baltimore, but to have some measure of success here in their first season back. It's been a rough go for the Philly Phantoms. Maybe they get it done this week. I don't like their chances to get it done, but they might. Same too with Dallas. Yes, they've beaten Austin already. This is another good matchup for them to try to be able to get to 2-2 on the season. I don't think it helps their postseason chances one way or another. But you look at Cali and Houston, and you mentioned that this is a game where their playoff hopes could be on the line here. I think if Cali loses, their road to the postseason is easier with that matchup against Minnesota coming up here. But with Houston coming up and thinking about who they have left, thinking about what their schedule looks like, you have to take advantage of home field here. And in my opinion, the Houston team, Houston Energy, they really need a win this week because I think their hopes are in a lot more dire straits than Cali's are with a loss.
And in the first of 2 games of the week, having finished the road portion of their season, the 3-0 Pittsburgh Passion welcomed the 1-2 Tampa Bay Inferno. These teams met in week 1 of the season, with the Passion leaving Tampa with the win. This game is at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Alex, Pittsburgh is in a position where they will not have to travel again until Canton, Ohio. your thoughts on their schedule and how this game looks.
Well, I think that's the big talking point here, where you look at this game on paper, and this should be a repeat performance, at least how you look at it, from the game that was down in Tampa back in the early portion of this season. We talked in an earlier segment about how well Marcelino Chavez is playing. We talked about how well the rest of that offense for the Pittsburgh Passion continues to play. When you have, and again, we've been waiting for somebody to supplant the Boston Renegades as that team, but when you're the Pittsburgh Passion and you have the number 1 ranked offense in the WFA's Pro Division and the number 2 ranked defense, that's a pretty good mark and a good feather in your cap, no matter what league you're playing in. And so when you look at it, this is, in theory, the schedule for Pittsburgh, the last 3 games that they have. This week against Tampa, next game against DC, and then a concluding game against Cincinnati, who's probably going to be in the Pro Division next year. You have to look at this and say, this is an opportunity not just to get right, but to get that bad taste out of your mouth from last year's postseason. The last time Pittsburgh played at home was when they lost to the Boston Renegades in that National Conference Championship game. So when you look at this game, yes, Tampa's going to give you a good fight. Yes, we talked about the excellent series of play that we continue to see from Tampa and how they continue to develop something. They just need more bodies, and they just need more able bodies to be able to play both sides of the ball, so that way you're not having that constant back and forth. Tampa's going to give Pittsburgh a good test. Should Pittsburgh win? Yes, absolutely. But for the Passion, the first time playing in front of their home fans since that disaster of a game last July against Boston, you have to be ready to go. In theory, this stretch should be a get-right stretch, a get-ready stretch, where, like you said, you might not have to travel again until the end of July. But you also have to recognize that Tampa will give you a test. DC, you just played them. You double-dipped them. But you still got to play them again. And the Cincinnati Cougars, who knows what's going to happen in that matchup? You take care of business against Tampa now, you probably lock up that number 1 seed out in the East. But you still have to play the schedule out and not take anybody for granted. Pittsburgh should be the favorite if they don't make mistakes as they did a year ago.
We will be right back to look at our second game of the week. And in the second game of the week, the 4-0 high-scoring offense of the St. Louis Slam are on the road versus the 2-1 Minnesota Vixen. When these teams met in St. Louis earlier this season, it was the Slam on top 34-27. Game time is 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central. Alex, Minnesota is the only team to put up points against St. Louis this season. Do they have enough to give the Slam their first loss of the season and get the season split?
Well, let's go back to the last time that these two teams were Game of the Week earlier on in this season. I said back in that road to Canton that followed that the result of that game, the scoreline of that game, did not indicate how that game truly was. Massey does not care how that final score was arrived at. All that matters is that it was. And now there was an opening for Minnesota to slip into that number 1 spot in the American. Granted, it's going to take a Herculean effort this weekend against the St. Louis Slam. Not just winning against St. Louis. That's not enough. You have to win by multiple scores. And right now where the Massey ratings are, that one win to me, and obviously I went to White Bear Lake High School here in Minnesota, White Bear math, it's a thing, we know. So I don't understand how the Massey math works, but you need to have those multiple scores. Again, strength of schedule, I thought that maybe we might see St. Louis dip after they defeated the Durban City Dynamite this past week. They didn't. And so when you look at it here, it has to be multiple scores. Problem for Minnesota again. Can they get it done against a St. Louis team that they historically have struggled on? Yes, they're the only team this season that has scored points against the St. Louis Slam. But even that in the past hasn't mattered. You take out that one game that was played here, St. Louis's second game back after not having played in 3 calendar years, and you put 40 points up on them. This defense is firing on all cylinders. This is going to be the toughest test for Minnesota. Yeah, they got Cali. Yeah, they got Nebraska coming up again. But you need to be on your finest game, and you cannot give St. Louis any mistakes. Erin Kelly is playing some of the best football of her career. The running game tandem, Shy Rhodes, 4 touchdowns, 100 yards with a broken rib. The stories just get continually better and better for this team that continues to really develop. The questions where all these times I had questions about, well, this secondary part's a problem. This wide receiving part is a problem. They're not being that problem anymore. Those answers are starting to get there. And now, again, this matchup against St. Louis defines the season. You don't want to go back down to St. Louis in June for a lot of reasons. You don't want to go down there in July for a lot of reasons. But you need multiple points here. You need multiple touchdowns here to avoid that. I don't know that happens on Saturday.
Lois Cook continues her interviews with the stars of the WFA Pro Division. This week, sitting down with Erin Kelly of the Minnesota Vixen in her segment, A Timeout with Lo.
Erin Kelly, quarterback, Minnesota Vixen.
Rolling to the right, puts the ball up for a shot, looking for Sam Barber, passes, complete.
How did you get into football?
I've always been into athletics, mostly basketball. I knew some players on the team. I played in a previous tackle football league, the eights, and I was ready for the next step, so I said I'm trying out for the Vixen or I'm not playing, and here we sit.
Can you talk about your mentality of the game and what it takes to be a quarterback? What's that mindset like?
You have to understand leadership without being like a dictator. So for me, it's very much hearing my teammates, how they like to be spoken to, approached, and then taking that and utilizing that in the game, whether it's on the field, at practice, if someone's frustrated, how do we go about that, how do we move it forward?
How would you say that the qualities and characteristics that you have on the field, how does that translate into your profession outside of the game?
Well, I have to talk to a lot of people because they have insurance. So when I'm approaching them, it's all about empathy and where they're coming from, because usually it's not a great situation that they're in. It's some sort of disaster, and figuring out what their main goal is. Like if their house burned down, what's the one thing that they really were focused on that was in there, and how can I help them the most at the time being? And then get into the end game of rebuilding the house, or whatever it might be.
For your football career, what has the WFA meant for you?
WFA, the organization, has grown as a whole, even with me being in it. I've only been in it 4 years. Starting back in 2022 until now, we've had multiple deals. It's just the growth and the amount they want it to grow, women's football specifically, I think is unmatched.
Ball to Radford, right on the money. Radford getting 2 feet down, her second reception already of the game.
If you could say one thing to a person who doesn't believe in women's football, who doesn't believe that we're good enough, what would that be? What would you say?
Come watch a game. Coming out to the field, sit through it, see what it's like, talk to players, see what they've gone through. I mean, the hardships are all of it. That's what's made women's football grow. But I truly think is sitting there, getting to know the players, watching the game happen. Because most people are like, you don't hit. I'm like, all right, go get hit by one of them, because I can tell you they hit. Whew.
It was announced earlier this month that the Road to Canton Road of Champions series won a Hometown Media Award for Entertainment and Arts Series Independent Producer. I want to thank Town Square Television and everyone that helps bring this show to life for you, the viewer. If you have something that you want to see on this show, please send it to us at roadofchampions@gmail.com. I also want to apologize for my voice. I was fortunate enough to get to announce the PWHL National Championship game, and our own Minnesota Frost took it away from me when they claimed their second Walter Cup. For Lois Cook and Alex Wested, I'm Brian Sweeney, and we'll see you next time on the Road of Champions.